The movie opens in 1993 with a scene of a girl traveling on a bus. After a while, 3 individuals board the bus and introduce themselves as Tracy, Tony, and Madison. The girl introduces herself as Lisa. She inquires about their destination, and Madison reveals it's Sambutsi. Lisa mentions that she is also headed there and shares that she is a restorer, specializing in painting restoration. Tracy explains that they are biologists traveling to Sambutsi to study the local fauna. Late at night, they all reach Sambutsi. At one point, Lisa informs them that her hotel is in a different direction, but expresses interest in meeting up with them on their day off. Tracy states that they will be free in a few days and will visit her then. With that, they bid farewell and go their separate ways. The following morning, Lisa waits at a bus stop when a man approaches her and informs her that the bus has already departed. He asks about her destination, and she replies, Malvi Mansion. Offering assistance, he introduces himself as Marcus, and Lisa shares her name as well. Marcus escorts her to the mansion and, before leaving, mentions that he runs a nearby pub, inviting her to visit whenever she has time. With that, they part ways. The scene shifts to Lisa sitting at Malvi Mansion. A woman enters and introduces herself as Emma Fosca Malvi. Emma leads Lisa to the painting that requires restoration. Lisa gathers her belongings and follows Emma, who explains that the painting was damaged in a fire. Lisa asks about the artist. Turns out it was Arcano, an artist from the 1500s, renowned for his ability to paint the unknown. Lisa observes that the painting is severely damaged and estimates that it would take about a month to restore. However, Emma interrupts, insisting that the restoration must be completed within 2 weeks, as the painting is set to be part of an exclusive auction in London. Emma leaves and Lisa immediately begins restoring the painting. As she concentrates on her task, she suddenly hears a woman singing. Curious, she decides to investigate. Following the sound, she notices a girl singing a haunting melody. Lisa approaches her, but the moment she gently taps the girl on the shoulder, the girl abruptly flees. The scene transitions to Tony, setting up a microphone in the woods. After relaxing in his tent, he hears an eerie noise and decides to investigate. Venturing deeper into the woods, his voice is soon followed by screams of pain. Alarmed by the screams, Tracy and Madison wake up. Madison leaves Tracy alone and enters the woods to search for Tony. She discovers Tony's cap stained with blood. She hurries back to the tent and insists that they must go to the police. Before they can take action, someone suddenly grabs Madison by the neck and drags her away, leaving Tracy alone and terrified. As Tracy tries to sneak out of the tent in fear, an unknown figure strikes her on the head, causing her to collapse. The scene then shifts to Madison, who finds herself trapped behind bars in a dimly lit cell. She notices a man named Rocco vomiting in another cell. She calls out, but Rocco continues to vomit without responding. As she scans her surroundings, she sees Tracy locked in a nearby cell. Moments later, she spots Tony in another cell as well. The scene transitions to a dinner table, where Lisa is having dinner with Emma and her daughter Julia. Lisa attempts to strike a conversation, but Julia suddenly drops her fork and leaves the table without a word. The next scene shifts to someone entering the area containing the cells. The figure carefully looks around before locking the door behind them. It is then revealed to be a strange man named Aruda, who silently observes each prisoner. From one of the cells, Rocco warns not to look. Overcome with fear, Tony screams, demanding to be released. Aruda remains silent, calmly walking over to a nearby well. He lowers a vessel into the well, retrieves it, and sets it aside. Suddenly, in a violent outburst, he approaches Tony's cell and begins beating him mercilessly. He lands heavy blows, breaking Tony's hand and delivering brutal punches to his face. Tony desperately crawls, attempting to escape, but without hesitation, Aruda attacks him with a knife. Dragging Tony's limp body, he throws him into the well as the other prisoners scream in horror. The scene cuts to Lisa, diligently working on the painting. As she concentrates, she hears a faint noise. Dismissing it, she tries to refocus. While cleaning the painting, she uncovers a strange, eerie face hidden beneath the layers of damage. Intrigued, she attempts to scrape away a burnt section from the face. Suddenly, a piercing scream echoes through the room, startling her. In shock, she accidentally cuts her finger with the tool she is using. Reeling from the pain, she removes her glove, and her blood splashes onto the painting. Later that night, despite her injured hand, Lisa struggles to continue working. Suddenly the lights go out. In the darkness, she notices someone entering her room and realizes it's her father. He looks at her with disappointment and slays him in front of her. Lisa recoils in horror, but in an instant, she realizes it was nothing more than a vision. The scene then cuts to the cell, where Rocco is desperately attempting to escape, but his cutter suddenly snaps. Frustrated, he tells Madison that there's a passage, but his tool is now useless. He reassures her that he will bring help once he gets out. In a desperate attempt to assist, Madison throws a cutter toward him, but it lands too far away. After struggling for a moment, he finally manages to grab it. Meanwhile, As Lisa sleeps, an unknown presence enters her room. The entity slowly approaches her and lies down beside her. Its touch turns inappropriate, gradually moving its hand to her neck. Without warning, it begins strangling her. Lisa's terror intensifies as she lays eyes on the entity. It haunts her until she suddenly wakes up in a chair, staring at the painting. To her horror, the entity from her dream has manifested within the painting. A wave of mumbling and crying voices fills the room, and tears fall from Lisa's eyes. Just then, an object drops to the floor. As she bends down to pick it up, Julia is revealed, standing behind her. Julia warns her to run away since the painting is cursed. She says that it's a witch named Dorca. If you give life to this canvas, you will be haunted forever. Without another word, Julia turns and leaves. The scene shifts to Lisa, meeting with Marcus. She confides in him about the terrifying experiences she has had in the mansion. Marcus tries to reassure her, suggesting that her fears might stem from adjusting to an unfamiliar place. The scene then cuts to Aruda entering the cell area. He approaches the well and lowers a vessel into it. Suddenly, hands emerge from the darkness of the well. One of them slashes its own forearm with the other hand's nail, letting blood drip into the vessel. Aruda retrieves the blood-filled vessel, sets it aside, and then moves toward Rocco's cell. Watching in horror, Madison attempts to divert Aruda's attention. Aruda immediately turns toward her, approaches her cell, and grabs her by the neck, lifting her off the ground. With a violent toss, he throws her back against the cell wall, then unlocks the door and drags her out. Without hesitation, he slashes Madison's hand in two, rendering her helpless. He mutilates her body, drags her toward the well, and mercilessly throws her in where a monstrous entity approaches Madison and ends her for good. The next scene shows Lisa speaking with Julia. Lisa, growing increasingly unsettled, asks if she is okay. Julia, frustrated, responds how her mother has completely ruined her life. Just then, Emma enters, furious at Julia for speaking out. She scolds her daughter before turning to Lisa and instructing her to come with her. As they walk, Lisa hesitantly says how Julia told her some unsettling things about the painting. Emma, unfazed, replies that she makes up terrifying stories and she should not listen to her. She then firmly reminds Lisa to focus on her work, warning that, as per the contract, any delays in the restoration will result in severe penalties. Later that night, as Lisa sleeps, a girl enters her room, crying and pushing a wheelchair. Lisa wakes up, terrified, to see Tony sitting in the wheelchair, his legs and hands broken, his body covered in injuries. Behind him stands Tracy, who is also crying. Tracy pleads with Lisa to help them. The scene cuts to Lisa with Marcus, where she shares the horrors of her nightmares and expresses her overwhelming desire to leave the mansion. However, she confesses that she can't because of the binding contract she signed. Marcus suggests that she should focus on completing her work as quickly as possible and tries to comfort her. Later, Lisa takes some medicine when she hears someone crying. Curiosity piqued, she cautiously goes to investigate. She pulls back the curtain and is horrified to find Madison, badly injured and crying in a bathtub. Overcome with fear, Lisa runs out of the room and collides with Emma. Emma accuses Lisa of taking, then turns off the water in the bathtub. She scolds Lisa for not taking her work seriously and inspects the painting. Emma sternly warns her that if the restoration is not completed on time, Lisa will regret it. Next, we see Rocco working tirelessly to open the passage. After a great deal of effort, he finally unlocks it. As he attempts to enter, a hand suddenly grabs him by the neck. The entity peels the skin from his face and begins devouring it, ultimately ending him. Hearing his agonizing screams, Tracy cries out in terror. The scene shifts to Emma, standing in front of a mirror, sipping a drink. In the reflection, Dorca appears, revealing that Emma is the mastermind behind everything that has been happening in the mansion. While Lisa continues working on the painting, there's a knock at the door. She opens it to find Julia standing there. Julia explains to Lisa that the painting was created in 1493. In that year, they sacrificed Billy to summon a monstrous being named Goran, and that's how they captured him. She tells Lisa that her mother demanded the curse to use Goran's blood for eternal youth. Julia warns that if the red moon shines on the painting before midnight, the curse will renew for another 500 years, and they must prevent that from happening. Lisa, skeptical, responds that Julia has a vivid imagination but still needs to finish her work. Julia then reveals that the last 3 victims captured were 2 girls, one black and one blonde, and a guy. Lisa, in disbelief, asks if Julia is sure. Julia nods and leads Lisa to the location where the prisoners are being held. As Lisa and Julia approach, they see Aruda unlocking a door and descending into the basement. Just as they move closer, Emma calls for Julia, prompting her to leave reluctantly. Determined to help the captives, Lisa arms herself for protection and cautiously heads downstairs to rescue Tracy, Tony, and Madison. She slips through a door and follows Aruda into the basement, but as she sneaks in, she accidentally knocks over some metal rods. In a panic, she hides, holding her breath. Aruda steps out to investigate. In her hiding spot, Lisa catches a horrifying glimpse of severed hands and legs, crawling with maggots. Aruda looks around briefly, but assuming the noise was caused by rats, he heads back into the cell room. Tracy freezes in terror as Aruda approaches and unlocks her cell. He begins touching her, but she strikes him and tries to flee. However, she stumbles on the stairs, hitting her head and losing consciousness. After a while, Tracy regains consciousness, only to find Aruda standing over her with a heated knife. He presses it against her face, burning her skin as she screams in agony. The scene shifts to Aruda holding Tracy, her body dangling halfway inside the well. Just then, Lisa attacks Aruda from behind, striking his face and rushing to save Tracy. She manages to free Tracy, and the two begin to run. As they flee, Tracy steps on a nail, crying out in pain. Lisa quickly pulls out the nail, but Tracy continues to sob from the pain. Meanwhile, Aruda regains consciousness, surveys the scene, and notices the open passage and Rocco's half-devoured body. He hears a noise behind him and turns in anger, but immediately drops his weapon and kneels. Goran appears before him. Goran lunges at Aruda, tearing into him and consuming his body. The scene shifts back to Tracy and Lisa, still running. Suddenly, Marcus appears and, in a shocking turn, shoots Tracy with his bow. He orders Lisa to enter the room with the painting. Inside, everyone is gathered, holding candles and waiting for midnight. Emma instructs Lisa to finish the painting before the clock strikes 12. Reluctantly, Lisa resumes her work, slowly revealing Emma's image on the canvas. As she continues, Marcus's face emerges, followed by the chant Emma used to capture Goran. Just then, Julia bursts into the room, yelling for everyone to step back as she threatens to set the painting on fire. Emma stops her, and Julia angrily accuses Emma of trapping her in a little girl's body for centuries. Enraged, Emma commands Marcus to slay Julia. Before he can act, Lisa hurls cleaning solvent onto Marcus's face. Emma lets out a furious scream and shoots Lisa with an arrow. As Marcus moves to finish them off, the room is flooded with moonlight. It touches everyone, transforming them into their true, aged forms. One by one, they wither and perish. Lisa and Julia watch in horror as Emma rapidly ages, crumbles into ashes, and vanishes. Julia begins to change as well. She turns to Lisa and says she has to go too. She rises as her body ages rapidly, and moments later, she disintegrates into ashes, leaving Lisa utterly alone. In pain, Lisa stumbles toward the door, trying to escape. Suddenly, Goran appears, heading straight for her. Panicked, Lisa slams the door shut, but Goran begins pounding on it. Desperate, Lisa approaches the painting and starts scrubbing away the section containing the chant. Goran breaks through the door and storms into the room. Just then, Lisa begins reciting the chant from the painting. Goran lets out a deafening scream before the scene fades to black. 30 years later, Lisa is seen in the mansion, still youthful. She makes her way to the basement. Downstairs, we see a team of doctors and Goran, still alive but held captive. Lisa approaches and coldly instructs the doctor to increase production. The doctor takes a syringe and injects it into Goran's throat, eliciting a blood-curdling scream. Lisa watches for a moment before turning and walking out of the room. The camera lingers on Goran's torment before fading to black. The movie ends.